How dare you? With those words from my mother-in-law, I was kicked out of the house. My mother-in-law, Patricia, had been injured and was urgently taken to the hospital. I had rushed there with my husband, Mark, only to be suddenly confronted with such an accusation. All eyes, including those of my husband and father-in-law named Bill, turned to me. And so, I was expelled from the family for an unfounded crime. But I had no memory of doing anything wrong. Later, with advice from a certain individual, I realized there was a shocking truth about Patricia. My name is Sarah. I'm a 37-year-old housewife. I've been a housewife since I got married to Mark 10 years ago. I don't have many friends, so I mostly stay at home. Mark and I have been dating since college and decided to get married a while after we both started working. A few years back, we started living with my father-in-law Bill and mother-in-law Patricia. Originally, we wanted to have kids, and decided against living together considering the kids. But, we found out we had trouble conceiving. We tried infertility treatments desperately, but couldn't have a child. Continuing the treatments would not only be expensive but also mentally stressful, so we decided not to have children. That's when talks about living with my in-laws began. Honestly, I wasn't too keen on the idea. But my in-laws didn't seem like bad people, so I thought maybe living with them might be okay. We began living together on the condition that Mark would always have my back. Considering the age of Patricia and Bill, I handled most of the household chores. I'd wake up at 5 a.m., adjusting to their schedule, and make breakfast. Lunch was made according to their individual schedules. I did the cleaning daily and sometimes even drove them to the hospital when I had some spare time. I did my best for my in-laws and I thought our relationship wasn't that bad. But one day, I overheard a conversation between Patricia and Bill. That day, I had plans to have lunch with a friend, so I made lunch for my in-laws early and left the house. I was enjoying lunch at a cafe with my friend, but she had to leave early because her daughter got a fever. As a result, I ended up parting ways with my friend a few hours earlier than we had originally planned. I thought about making a detour somewhere, but I just did my grocery shopping for dinner and headed straight home. I figured my elderly in-laws would feel more at ease if I was home. After finishing shopping, I opened the front door and headed for the living room. There's a hallway leading to the living room, and my in-laws' bedroom is off of it. I heard them conversing as I walked by. They usually keep their door completely shut, but that day it was slightly ajar, allowing their conversation to filter out. I wasn't initially curious about their conversation, but the moment I was about to walk past, I heard my name. Intrigued, I wanted to know what they were discussing. Leaning close to the door, I was met with a barrage of shocking words. "Sarah's out having lunch with her friend again. She did the same just recently. Despite being a full-time homemaker, she lives a carefree life. Without Mark, she wouldn't be able to maintain that lifestyle. Well, maybe Sarah just needs a break every once in a while. But I do feel it's unfair. We can't dine out because of our health, yet she goes out all the time on her own. Exactly. Why did he marry her? I wished he married the one he was dating before. Besides, Sarah has a rather unrefined side. Her cooking isn't great either. I discovered that especially my mother-in-law had a negative perception of me." I had never heard such comments directly, and Mark had never mentioned that his parents disliked me. So this was my first time realizing that they did. Knowing they disliked me made interactions with them somewhat awkward. Of course, I continued with my usual chores and tasks, but the conversations between us started dwindling. It was hard to confide in Mark, and if I did, confronting the in-laws would likely lead to denial, making my case harder. As I pondered what to do next, things took a worse turn. My mother-in-law's cherished necklace went missing. And shockingly, she blamed it on me. She demanded a search of my room, and to prove my innocence, I complied. Though I was certain I hadn't taken it, Patricia's necklace mysteriously emerged from a drawer containing my jewelry. See, I knew it was her. She always eyed my necklace with envy. I bet she's taken other things too. With that, Mark and my father-in-law frantically searched my room. In the end, only the necklace was found. I was left standing in the middle of the room, feeling ostracized. From that day on, I was treated like a thief, distanced by the family. They wouldn't listen to any of my explanations. To make matters worse, my mother-in-law was spreading nasty rumors about me throughout the neighborhood. "That woman stole my necklace. Can you believe it? And she keeps denying it, even though it was found in her room." Given the talk every time I left the house, I was met with cold stares. Life went on this way for a while, and being home became increasingly uncomfortable. Usually, I would stay home, engage in my hobby of crafting, and converse with my in-laws. However, lately, I had been spending more time outside. After preparing breakfast for the in-laws in the morning, I would head out. I'd kill time at diners or comic book stores until Mark returned from work. One day, I received a call from Mark informing me that his mother had been urgently hospitalized. "Where are you? Mom fell down some stairs at a pedestrian bridge and got injured. Please come to the nearest hospital from the house. Dad and I will be with Mom," Mark said hurriedly, before hanging up. I happened to be close to the hospital at that moment, so it only took me about 5 minutes to get there on foot. After quickly finishing up some errands, I walked briskly to the hospital where I heard my mother-in-law had been taken. I asked a nurse which room she was in, and as I headed to the room, I had an ominous feeling. When I opened the door, everyone present turned to look at me simultaneously. Their gazes were sharp and hostile, like they were looking at a villain. I thought my bad feeling might be right. Then, my mother-in-law pointed at me and shouted, "How dare you?" When I asked what was going on, she exclaimed, "Don't play dumb. You pushed me down the stairs. When I was walking over the pedestrian bridge near the house, I felt someone push me from behind. It hurt so much when I fell, but with the last of my strength, I looked up, and there you were. You vanished before others gathered, but I'm sure it was you." "No, I didn't." I tried to explain that it wasn't me, but my husband and father-in-law interrupted. "I never thought you'd be capable of such a thing. Just leave our home." "I agree. This is for the best. You two had issues before. It's better if you live separately." "That's right. Just leave. You're not family. And Mark, you should divorce her." "Yeah, I'm going to," Mark said. Without being able to defend myself, it was decided that we would divorce, and I would be ousted from the family. Leaving the hospital before my husband and father-in-law, I felt lost. I never imagined things would turn out this way, and my parents live far away. It would take a lot of effort to move my belongings there. Moreover, my parents were strict, and I didn't know what they'd say if I told them I was divorcing. However, at that moment, I thought they were the only ones I could rely on. On my way home from the hospital, I called my mother. "I'm sorry. I'm gonna get a divorce and I want to come back for a while. Is that okay?" Hearing the tone of my voice, my mother sensed something was wrong. "Okay, I understand. I'll tell your father. Just pack what you can for tomorrow. We'll rent a large vehicle and come over." When I got home, I packed my belongings as my mother instructed. I couldn't take everything, so I left the furniture. I packed my clothes, accessories, and mementos in boxes. I came across a photo of me and my husband. I wasn't sure if I should keep it. I loved him and I thought we could have lived happily together if it weren't for this incident. But I knew there was no going back. I'm sure he'll contact a divorce lawyer by tomorrow, and I've decided to throw away all the pictures of my husband once and for all. The next day, my parents came over in a large truck that could carry all my stuff. "Long time no see. You probably didn't sleep well last night. I'll drive, so you just rest in the car." And my father drove the long 6-hour journey by himself. My father had told me to get some sleep, but tears streamed down my face in the back seat, overwhelmed by my parents' kindness. I wasn't sure if they noticed or not, but they, sitting in the front, didn't say a word to me. After about 3 hours, my parents and I made it back home safely. I know you're tired, but could you tell me a bit more about what happened? You haven't done anything wrong, right? Given the situation, there's a chance you could be arrested, so I really want you to tell me everything, my parents asked, looking for more details. I explained that I was suspected of stealing my mother-in-law's necklace and now was being accused of pushing her down the stairs.
That's a lie, right? Why would anyone make up such a story?
I think someone either wanted to harass you, or they had something to hide. That's the only two options I see.
Something to hide? Maybe someone who shouldn't have been there was present and Patricia got seriously injured by accident. So they're trying to blame it on Sarah to cover it up, maybe?
What my father said made sense. But I had always thought such things only happened in TV shows or movies. No official complaint was made, and I just wanted to get a peaceful divorce. However, it seemed my parents thought otherwise. Well, it made sense. If their only daughter was being framed, they'd naturally want to prove her innocence.
Maybe we should do a bit more investigation? I'll also reach out to some folks I know.
Considering my parents' advice, I decided to look deeper into the matter. Just as I was about to look into the situation in detail, divorce papers from my husband's attorney were mailed to my parents' house. I thought having the divorce papers in front of me might make me reconsider. But to my surprise, I realized my feelings for my ex-husband Mark were gone. Probably because he had never supported me. Over time and through various events, I just didn't love Mark anymore. Having finally cut ties with Mark and both his parents, I began to seriously investigate the incident. Patricia, who used to be my mother-in-law, doesn't seem to have filed a complaint, and it appears the police and hospital staff find it a bit suspicious. Given the fuss she made, everyone probably expected her to file a complaint. Digging deeper would be quite a hassle. So, I decided to seek help from my father. He used to work for the NYPD, so he has many connections within the force. He was able to arrange for me to view the security footage from the nearby cameras. Security cameras don't store footage for very long, but thankfully, the footage around the staircase where Patricia was allegedly pushed was still available. Examining the footage closely, it was clear that Patricia was indeed pushed down the stairs. However, no matter how much they zoomed in, it wasn't me. To further solidify my alibi, I checked the footage from where I was at the same time. It showed me taking care of some business. This proved my innocence. Turns out, when I got the call about Patricia's accident, I was at a different hospital. Having endured more than my fair share of harassment from Patricia and her group, I had been visiting a psychiatrist. That day, I had an appointment, and the footage showed me leaving the psychiatrist's office. This confirmed I wasn't to blame, but I wasn't gonna let it end there. To clear my name from all the humiliation I'd suffered, I chose to confront Patricia and her group head-on. I brought an attorney with me and headed to Mark's house. After consulting with an attorney, it turned out that due to the emotional distress I suffered, I might be able to claim compensation. At home, there were Mark, Patricia, and Bill, my ex-father-in-law, all staring at us with puzzled looks.
Who's that guy? Why bring someone like that here now? I said I wouldn't press charges, so you should be grateful.
In response to Patricia, the attorney presented a document.
What's this?
The document stated that I was not the cause of Patricia's injury, and that someone else had pushed her down the stairs.
I apologize for the late introduction. I am Sarah's attorney. As mentioned in this document, Sarah was somewhere else on the day you testified that she was pushed down the stairs. Of course, we've already verified the truth with security camera footage. If you'd like, I can show you the footage. And there was another person visible near the stairs besides you, Patricia.
When the attorney explained that much, Patricia quickly pulled the document towards herself.
What the heck is this? Just when I thought you'd suddenly show up, this is all in the past. I said I'd forgive you, so please don't bring it up anymore. Patricia was clearly panicking.
Both Mark and Bill seemed suspicious.
Why are you so flustered? If Mom didn't do anything wrong, you should be confident about it. That's right, We're on Patricia's side, after all.
Despite their reassuring words, Patricia's face grew paler.
Aren't you too curious about who pushed Patricia down the stairs? I do wonder. Who was it? Who would do such a thing to my dear wife? I won't forgive them. Well, hold on a sec.
Ignoring Patricia's attempt to stop me, I continued.
It was Patricia's affair partner. Her affair partner?
Patricia had been infatuated with a man for some time. That man was a bartender, and Patricia had gone into debt just to lavish money on him. However, no matter how much money she gave him, he never truly belonged to her. Frustrated, Patricia confronted him. That confrontation took place at the top of those stairs. Even though the Patricia didn't own the man, reports indicate that there was a physical relationship between them. It seems Patricia was waiting for the man to leave the bartender job, but he showed no signs of leaving and often went out with other customers. The man had always seen Patricia as a troublesome client, and in a fit of anger, he allegedly pushed her down the stairs. Realizing the gravity of his actions, the man tried to help Patricia, but she said, "It's okay. We'll say my daughter-in-law did this. You should go home." Unable to approach the police for this particular investigation, they had no choice but to hire a private investigator. Pictures capturing the two are clear, and there's no way to deny it. Upon presenting the evidence to the police, an immediate investigation was launched, and the man was arrested. During interrogation, he confessed everything that transpired between him and Patricia on the staircase.
Tell me it's a lie. Please say it isn't true. Cheating, huh? You're the worst.
Realizing there's no escaping the truth, Patricia immediately began to apologize.
I'm sorry. I was just so lonely. What do you mean, lonely? I've always been there for you. We're getting a divorce. I don't want to hear any excuses.
Upon being exposed, Patricia faced an immediate decision of divorce. Though she tried desperately to salvage her relationship with Bill, he was too enraged to listen. Mark, too, was shocked to learn of his mother's infidelity and looked at Patricia with disgust. Moreover, the amount of debt Patricia accumulated to lavish the man was several $100,000, an amount she couldn't possibly repay with her pension alone. Patricia wasn't the type to save money, so repaying the debt would likely take a significant amount of time. She begged Mark for help, but he snapped back, "Are you kidding me? Because of your lies, I divorced Sarah. I'm not giving you a single dime for the money you borrowed for your lover." In the end, Patricia faced both a divorce and being disowned by Mark. Unable to repay the money and left without a place to stay, Patricia had no choice but to sadly return to her own home. To pay off the debt as soon as possible, it seems that Patricia's elder brother, who took over the family house, has taken on the responsibility. However, she'll be isolated until she repays all the money to him. Patricia can't just go outside as she pleases, and she doesn't have any money to spend freely. When Patricia receives her pension, it's all ordered to be given to her brother. I bet she regrets mingling with that bar and harassing me. I haven't seen Patricia since then, but apparently, the once youthful-looking Patricia has aged considerably. And for me, having been mentally tormented by those three on a daily basis, I managed to get a small amount in damages. From a certain point, whenever I spoke to those three, I always made sure to have a voice recorder on, so I had more than enough evidence when claiming for damages. Later on, I received numerous messages and voicemails from Mark expressing his wish to reconcile. But I'm not gonna get back with Mark. Even though he had promised to always be on my side when we moved in together, just thinking of being with Mark, who couldn't even keep that single promise, gives me the creeps. I'm sure if we were together in the future, I'll find more unpleasant things about him, and in the end, I'd be the one getting hurt. It seems Mark and Bill are living together, but with Patricia and I gone, their house is said to be filled with a cold atmosphere. Bill isn't very strong health-wise, so he needs regular hospital visits. Mark juggles his job and housework while also driving Bill to and from the hospital. It must be quite tough for him. I get diary-like messages from him every day about his daily struggles, but I usually send them straight to the trash without reading all of them. Since divorcing Mark, I've been enjoying my single life. I've successfully found a new job, and I became a beauty advisor, something I've always wanted to be. Up until now, I was always occupied with looking after Mark and my in-laws, so my own beauty regimen was always on the back burner. During a time when I was away from my in-laws, I once visited a department store's cosmetics section. There, I received advice on how to enhance my beauty and was told how to be more confident. That was the first time in my life I felt so confident, and I believe the beauty advisor at that time played a huge role in making me who I am today. That's why I decided to pursue a career as a beauty advisor, hoping to inspire others the way I was inspired. Although the job involves many behind-the-scenes tasks and challenges, I find it fulfilling. Thankfully, since becoming a beauty advisor, I've received many compliments on my appearance. I've started to attract attention from men. A while back, a man approached me at a cafe, and we've been on several dates since. Just the other day, after confessing his feelings, we officially started dating. He knows I'm divorced, and even after knowing my past, he expressed his feelings for me. Unlike Mark, he's always supportive, and he's the first one to lend a hand when I'm in need. It's been 3 years since my divorce from Mark, and I'll soon turn 40. Lately, I've been pondering if remarrying wouldn't be such a bad idea. But first and foremost, I want to be someone I'm proud of and want to continue improving myself. I genuinely wish that women with feelings like mine would be more confident and speak up without fear. End of the call. Hello? You can come over. I noticed the video call hadn't ended completely. As I tried to end it, my husband was making a call to someone. I found his overly familiar demeanor puzzling. Peeking with my in-laws, I witnessed an unexpected move by my husband. My name is Katherine Johnson. I'm a 36-year-old housewife. Currently, I live with my in-laws and our 3 children. My husband was assigned overseas for 3 years, and I was apprehensive about raising the children alone during this period. I worried about potential illnesses or injuries. After discussing my concerns with my husband, we decided to move in with my in-laws. My husband, Bob, and I have been classmates, dating since high school. I've known my in-laws since then. We decided to marry once we were financially stable after graduating from college, and we got married when I was 24. Bob wanted to support the family soon, so he joined a large company. He was ambitious and was highly regarded even though he had just started. Therefore, we were able to get married sooner than planned. Both our parents looked forward to our wedding. They were delighted at our ceremony. Both families got along well, having interactions even before our marriage, feeling just like one big family. Both parents were very pleased with our wedding, and whenever I remember the ceremony, it brings back happy memories. On my side, aside from my parents, I have an older brother, 3 years my senior. He lives far away, and we occasionally meet. He sees Bob as a real younger brother, and they've been close since school. They both played sports in school and even enjoy watching games together. When our children were born, he was thrilled, always bringing gifts. Such a caring brother. However, tragedy struck when our parents passed away in an accident shortly after our first child was born. The last time I saw them, they were gleaming with joy, eagerly waiting to see their grandchild grow. Their faces, full of hope for the future and believing in continued happiness, is my last memory of them. I had always looked forward to doing things with my parents and my newborn child. But, just as they were in such high spirits, they were taken from me suddenly in an accident. Preparing for their funeral with my older brother, I was so shocked that I felt numb for quite a while. While preparing for the funeral with my brother, I was in shock for a while. My memories of that period are blurry. During the funeral, I was naturally overwhelmed by a sense of loss. I remember weeping quietly, with tears streaming down my face non-stop. My brother desperately tried to comfort me as I grieved deeply, but I felt like I wasn't truly present. Even after the funeral, it was my husband, Bob, who supported me. Even though Bob was close with my parents and grieved their loss, and despite his busy work schedule and taking care of our child, he was there for me. Seeing how Bob handled everything, I realized I couldn't stay like this and began to slowly recover. When I apologized for the burden I had placed on him during that time, Bob just laughed.
Couples are there to support each other during tough times. It's a given for me to be there for you, Catherine. It's only natural to put on a brave face for our family, even if it's hard,"
said Bob. Inspired by Bob's attitude, I vowed to do my best for our family. My in-laws, knowing how devastated I was during that period, became even more concerned about me.
"Catherine, we consider you our very own daughter. Please, don't hesitate to rely on us. We're here to help and support you anytime,"
they would tell me. Knowing them, I was reassured that living together would be worry-free. So, we canceled our apartment contract, completed the necessary paperwork to transfer our child's preschool, and moved into my in-laws' home. Our kids are attached to their grandparents, so we changed preschools for them to live together, but they didn't seem to mind. The house is a 2-story owned property that Bob had built when he was young. It was designed to be child-friendly and to be their residence in their old age, with attention to accessibility, making it a safe home for small children. The house is slightly bigger than our previous apartment, and given our young kids, moving in didn't pose any problems. Our old apartment wasn't 2-story, so initially, the kids found the stairs fascinating and often played on them together. I was concerned about how the change in environment might affect them, but seeing them play so energetically eased my worries. Even though they had to switch preschools, they seemed to adjust well and made new friends quickly. Though I was anxious they might follow from the changes, they've been healthy, which puts me at ease. Ever since we moved to New York, we've been living harmoniously with my in-laws, supporting one another. At first, since I was a stay-at-home mom, I intended to handle all the household chores. However, my in-laws proposed we share the responsibilities. While I took care of preparing meals, my mother-in-law did the laundry, though sometimes we'd switch roles. Apparently, she's not great at cooking, so she was relieved, and she even complimented my dishes. The house cleaning was shared between my in-laws and me, freeing up more of my time. I now get to spend more time with my kids, and I believe I've become more attuned to their subtle changes. The only issue, if it can be called that, is the kids missing their playtime with Bob. They adore him, and whenever he had time, he used to dote on them a lot. Despite his tiring job, Bob would sometimes tell me to take a break and handle some chores. He works hard, both at his job and with the kids, so much that I sometimes worried if he was resting enough.
"Even though you work and handle house chores, are you sure you're getting enough rest?"
When I asked Bob this, he assured me he was fine. Bob is gentle, family-oriented, and has a bright and cheerful demeanor. Being overseas, it's not so easy to travel back and forth, and in the span of 3 years, he only came back to the States once. Video calls with Bob while he's on his overseas assignment are something my kids and I really look forward to. With a 14-hour time difference, finding a common time can be tricky, but we try to video call at least once a month. We also exchange emails regularly, but nothing beats seeing each other's faces. We're always curious about his life abroad and want to ensure he's okay. Recently, the kids have grown more interested in the glimpses of foreign settings and Bob's stories during these calls. Today at 9 p.m., we're scheduled for a video call with Bob. The kids, eager to talk to their father, have even taken naps to ensure they stay awake. As I set up the computer for the call, the kids line up properly and soon start a lively conversation with Bob.
"Been a while, how've you been?"
When Bob's face appeared on the screen and I called out to him, the kids responded with joyous voices.
"Hey, Dad. We're doing good. Guess what?"
They began, animatedly using their hands to emphasize their points. Bob listened with a delighted expression. I had so much I wanted to discuss with Bob, but I decided to wait until the kids were asleep. My in-laws and I watched the conversation with warm smiles. Bob mentioned he had work later, but it sounded like he had about 2 hours to spare. After the kids, I was hoping to have some one-on-one time with my husband. Thanks to the consistent help from my in-laws, there were things difficult to discuss or issues I had been facing that I really wanted to share with Bob. About 30 minutes into the video call, perhaps because of their energetic chatter, the kids began to look sleepy. Even though they had taken a nap, it was around their usual bedtime, so they were likely tired. Yet, they seemed to still have more to say and were trying their best to stay awake. The youngest is mostly asleep, occasionally jolting awake, but quickly succumbing to drowsiness again. Seeing them in such a state, Bob gently suggested they go to bed. "Getting sleepy, huh? Just one more month and Dad'll be coming back to New York. We'll chat loads then." Bob's overseas assignment was coming to an end in a month. The kids were eagerly awaiting his return, but they still seemed to have so much to say. "Remember, you have school and preschool tomorrow. Let's call it a night." My in-laws and I also persuaded the kids, and soon they were off to bed. As the drowsy kids waved goodbye, Bob waved back. As I stood to take the kids to their rooms, my in-laws quietly offered, "You two probably have a lot to talk about. Leave the kids with us and take your time." Holding our youngest, who had fallen asleep, my in-laws walked the other kids to their room by the hand. Grateful for my mother-in-law's words, I settled in to chat with Bob. Even in just a month, it's easy to notice how much kids grow. When it came to talking about the kids, the topics were endless. At the parent-teacher conference, they seemed to be having a great time. When the teacher asked them a question, they answered confidently. They proudly told me all about it afterwards. It was adorable. Ever since our eldest started elementary school, with Bob being overseas, he's always looked forward to attending those conferences. I've been sending pictures regularly, but he always wants a detailed account during our calls. Seeing how much Bob values our family and takes joy in the kids' milestones always reminds me of how fortunate I am to have married such a wonderful man, and I cherish our current happiness. Besides updates about the kids, we also discussed some challenges, concerns, and future plans. After a while, my in-laws joined back in our conversation. Before we knew it, it was midnight. Bob had work to start, and we had an early day ahead, so we wrapped up the call. "Good night. You have work now, so take care," I said. Intending to end the call, I mistakenly only turned off my camera, leaving the call still active. Realizing I hadn't fully disconnected, my drowsy brain scrambled to properly end the call. "Call's over. Hello? I'm done with the family call. You can come over now." Then, without noticing the computer screen, Bob started making a call to someone. He had said he was about to get ready for work, but now he's inviting someone over? Moreover, the way he spoke was quite friendly, giving me an uneasy feeling and making me hesitant to end it. It felt not just friendly, but there was a kind of sweetness as if he was speaking to a lover. "What's going on?" Noticing my reaction, my in-laws asked, curious. "I thought he was heading to work, but it seems like he invited someone over. It's bothering me." I felt guilty about eavesdropping, even though he's my husband, but I told them I just wanted to check who was coming. Seeing Bob's behavior on the phone, it seemed like my mother-in-law felt the same way and agreed with me. So we decided to watch together. Although I had a bad feeling, I reassured myself thinking, maybe he's just close with a coworker, and I'm overthinking this. However, a foreign woman walked into the house, chatting familiarly with Bob and even touching him. No matter the cultural differences between the US and other countries, you wouldn't just invite a woman into your home or be this intimate. I instinctively looked at my in-laws, and both had a grim expression. They murmured in disbelief, watching the video as if seeing something inexplicable. But just as I thought maybe I was overreacting and it was just cultural differences, the two clearly began to engage in infidelity. "Wait, what?" Seeing Bob's shocking behavior, I was more calm than angry and quickly pressed the record button. My in-laws had a mix of guilt towards me and anger towards Bob on their faces. "Catherine, are you okay? You don't have to watch this if it's too hard," my mother-in-law said, concerned about me who was visibly shaking. Even in this situation, the care from my in-laws brought some comfort. "I need to see this for evidence." "I'm fine," I assured her and continued to watch. While I felt disgusted and angry about being cheated on, I was surprisingly calm. After the appalling act, the two began to talk on the bed. From their conversation, it was evident that the woman knew Bob was married, and it seemed to be a relationship limited to his time abroad.
"Thanks for taking me on that trip the other time."
"No problem. Thanks to your guidance, I had a great time." It turned out Bob had taken the woman on a trip recently. The destination was a place our kids had expressed interest in, and we had talked about visiting as a family someday. And since they had no acquaintances abroad, they seemed to have enjoyed their trip without any inhibitions.
"But you covered the expenses, right? Is the money okay?"
The woman spoke worriedly about money, seeming nervous about her affair being discovered. Unbelievably, Bob had been telling me he earned less than he actually did, and he had confided in me that he had been spending the extra on his leisure. Apparently, his company has 2 payroll locations. With this shocking revelation, all of Bob's past actions started to seem suspicious. My trust in Bob seemed to shatter audibly. By the time I finished observing Bob's behavior, it was past 2 a.m. Stunned by the shocking truth, the 3 of us were speechless.
"Let's get some sleep for now, and then think about what's next,"
my father-in-law muttered, and we decided to head to our bedrooms. Once in bed, I was wide awake, unable to sleep. Bob had always been caring, proactive in work and childcare, and kind. We've known each other since high school, so I thought I understood him pretty well. I never thought that the Bob I knew was a lie, but with recent events, I felt I no longer knew him. I had always believed he'd never cheat, and if it were just eyewitness accounts or photos, I probably wouldn't have believed he was having an affair. But having seen the scene on a video call, I was in shock and my thoughts were frozen, but gradually various emotions towards Bob began to well up. I found myself wiping away tears that wouldn't stop flowing. Knowing I had to be up early, I tried to sleep, but my mind kept returning to Bob, and my drowsiness vanished. Before I knew it, it was morning, and I hadn't slept a wink. I used makeup to hide the redness around my eyes from crying, and started preparing for the day. "Good morning, breakfast is ready." I called out cheerfully to my children, trying to act as usual.
"Mom, are you okay? Your eyes are red. Are you all right?"
I had tried to act strong in front of the kids, but they looked worried. I couldn't hide my bloodshot eyes and had caused them concern. "It's okay, honey. I just stayed up late last night, so I might be a bit tired."
"Oh, Mom. You gotta get proper sleep,"
I replied with a smile, and the kids mimicked my tone, saying the same thing, and laughed, looking relieved. After seeing off the kids, I decided to take a break because my in-laws were concerned. Maybe because I had moved around to prepare for the kids' morning, this time I fell asleep instantly. I wished that the events of the night had just been a dream, and as I lay down, my consciousness faded instantly. I had planned to rest for a short while but ended up sleeping until the evening. My father-in-law had picked up the kids from kindergarten, and my mother-in-law had prepared dinner.
"I'm so sorry for sleeping so much."
"Thank you." I apologized as I immediately helped my mother-in-law and carried on as usual. When night fell and the kids were asleep, I spoke to my in-laws about my thoughts on the future.
"I don't think I can live with Bob anymore. So, I'm considering getting a divorce."
At first, I was shocked and bewildered, but I couldn't see myself forgiving a husband like Bob, who could lie like that. I felt bad for my kind in-laws, but I couldn't imagine continuing my marriage with Bob.
"We're truly sorry for what our son has done.
We're truly sorry." My in-laws seemed remorseful about Bob's actions and offered to help with the divorce proceedings. And Bob would be returning from abroad in a month, so I decided to quickly prepare everything by then. The next day, I immediately consulted with a lawyer known for handling infidelity and divorce cases. Also, Bob was quite active on social media, posting about his life abroad. He had been posting photos from overseas, and our kids enjoyed seeing them. I thought he might be careful about it, but since his partner seemed to be a foreigner, I thought there might be some clues on his social media. So I checked. After investigating, I found the woman he was seeing and hired a private investigator to identify her. Turns out, she worked at the same company as Bob and was a local employee there. So, I explained the situation to Bob's company and asked for their cooperation. Bob had always been a straight shooter, so they didn't believe it initially. However, after showing them the video evidence, they understood and offered their support. I also informed my brother and some close friends about the whole thing. Everyone was skeptical at first, but after showing them the video, they all sided with me.
That guy, even with a family, what was he thinking, betraying like that?
Especially my brother, who was close to Bob and trusted him with me, was quite furious. Though it was just a month's time, being a homemaker gave me the flexibility to prepare, and with the video evidence at hand, I managed to get everything ready for the divorce. With the support of my in-laws and by splitting up the necessary tasks, we managed to finish everything before Bob's return. However, explaining to the kids was a real challenge. They were attached to Bob and were eagerly waiting for his return. If I didn't tell them we won't see him anymore, even after the divorce, they might still want to live with him. But, considering their young age, I softly explained the situation with Bob and managed to convince them that we couldn't live with him any longer.
Your dad, you see, he told us a very bad lie. And I just can't forgive him. So we can't live with him anymore.
Really? Well, okay then. Since Bob had been away on work abroad before, they thought it was just another one of those times. They'll probably understand better as they grow. For now, they seem to accept the fact that they won't be living with Bob. Having finished all the preparations, I invited the newly returned Bob for a meal, saying it's been a while. I told him to meet at a private dining room in a restaurant. To Bob's surprise, not just me and the in-laws, but also some company executives and a lawyer were present in the room. By the way, my kids were with my brother, who feared he might hit Bob if he saw him.
What's going on? Why are all these people here?
In front of all these unexpected faces, Bob asked with a puzzled look. The lawyer began explaining about his infidelity and the divorce.
I haven't cheated. There must be some mistake.
Bob vehemently denied, acting like a victim. Even when confronted with photos of the other woman, he insisted they were just colleagues and she was simply helping him adjust to life abroad. My husband desperately tried to explain himself, and had I not known any better, I might have thought it was all a misunderstanding. Seeing Bob lie so effortlessly, a chill ran down my spine.
You still say the same after seeing this?
Losing patience, my father-in-law, trying to keep his anger in check, showed the video evidence. Bob, clearly agitated, started to panic.
How did you get this? I didn't think I was being filmed.
His employers then told him they couldn't trust him anymore and notified him of his termination. My in-laws were furious with Bob, my husband, and confronted him.
No, family is everything. Trust me, I'm not gonna get a divorce.
I looked at Bob coolly, wondering what he was trying to say now.
We'll discuss the divorce in detail later.
I calmly said that to a flustered Bob and left the room. That night, Bob, hoping to talk to me, came to the house where we had lived with my in-laws. However, my children and I had already moved out. Through connections from my father-in-law, we were introduced to a secure and comfortable property, and we had moved immediately. I didn't want to see Bob anymore, so I made a snap decision to move. I felt guilty about having to change schools and daycares for the kids, but they seemed fine with it, which was a relief. Bob came over and wanted to know where our new place was, but my in-laws firmly refused to tell him and gave him a piece of their mind. Bob apparently left after that. He kept sending persistent messages afterward, but I only responded about the divorce mediation and ignored the rest. He kept sending messages full of excuses. It was annoying, thinking if he didn't want this, he shouldn't have cheated in secret. Furthermore, my mother-in-law informed me that a neighbor had spotted Bob near the school and kindergarten. He was probably waiting outside to catch a glimpse of our kids and talk to me. Hearing this, I was relieved we had moved to a distant area. A few days later, at the divorce mediation, Bob had lawyered up well, and we finalized the divorce smoothly. I claimed a portion of our assets and gained custody of all 3 kids. It was also decided I would receive child support. Bob pleaded,
Please don't divorce me. I'll never cheat again. I've been good till now, right? Give me another chance. It was just a lapse in judgment.
But it was too late.
You enjoyed yourself abroad without me. I don't want to see your face anymore.
Bob tried to cling, but I had no trust left for him and brushed him off coldly. However, he insisted on seeing the kids periodically. I didn't want them to meet Bob, but he does have the right to see them post-divorce, and if the kids wanted to, I felt it would be cruel to stop them. So, we decided that whenever Bob meets the kids, my in-laws or my brother would be present. After the divorce, Bob, not giving up, asked friends to mediate, playing the victim. However, since I had explained the situation to them in advance, they refused him. If I hadn't informed them, they might have felt sorry for Bob, leading to further issues. I was truly glad I had informed those around me about everything. Bob was once seen as a diligent worker and a loving father. But now, everyone knew about his lies and infidelity. He had no allies. His friends distanced themselves, my in-laws kept their distance, and Bob became increasingly isolated. Currently, Bob has almost run out of savings, and he has child support to pay, so he's been working non-stop. Because his previous professional circle knows about his actions, he's taken a full-time job in a different field. He's also juggling multiple part-time jobs. In the beginning, he was excited to see the kids, but as they grew, they understood what he had done, and the meetings became less frequent. I'm not sure about his mistress since she's abroad, but I heard she received a warning from her employer. She's still overseas, so I hope at the very least she's learned her lesson about getting involved with a married man. Life after the divorce is comfortable with the asset division and child support. Considering my children's future, I started working again. It was tough on my own, but with my brother's help, I managed to raise them well. Currently, I live on my own in a town a bit away from the city, where it's not too inconvenient. Since I've shifted to remote work, I spend a lot of time at home. Now that my children have grown and moved out, I have more free time. I'm enjoying a relaxed life gardening. Occasionally, my children visit with my grandchildren. I look forward to treating them to meals I've prepared, savoring my peaceful retirement.
We're all gonna stay over, isn't that nice?
I was dumbfounded by my mother-in-law's words right in front of me. My mother-in-law had come to my house without any notice. Behind her, there were 5 other women of her age, her friends. I had no idea she was coming today, and it was the first I'd heard of such a large group staying over. Seeing my stunned expression, my mother-in-law grinned and looked over at her friends behind her.
Sorry about my slow daughter-in-law. Well, how long are you planning to make us stand in the doorway?
Pressured to let them in by my mother-in-law, all I could do was frown in distress. Seemingly impatient, she forcibly stepped inside, at which point I pointed to something.
Excuse me, mother-in-law, but about this.
My name is Catherine, and I am currently a full-time housewife, 6 months pregnant. I had severe morning sickness, so I took maternity leave early and left the restaurant where I had worked for over 10 years. I had good relationships with my coworkers, so work was very enjoyable. I really wanted to work until the last minute, but my husband and colleagues advised against it. But I was filled with happiness. That's because, after 5 years of marriage, I was finally pregnant with our long-awaited child. When my husband and I met, we were both already 28 years old. We both liked children, but given our age, we tried not to get our hopes up too much. We worked hard, saved money, and looked forward to our annual trips as one of our greatest joys. Whether or not we had a child, we agreed to cherish these moments. And then, finally, we were blessed with a baby. However, almost as soon as I found out I was pregnant, my husband's long-term business trip was confirmed. He negotiated with his company, but due to business needs, he was deemed the most suitable candidate, and it was decided that he would stay out of town for about a year. So, I needed to get through daily life, prenatal checkups, and possibly even childbirth on my own. My husband was very worried, but in the end, he held my hand tightly and said, "I'll work hard and earn money for you and the baby." Since he was sending me living expenses during my leave, I could focus on housework. When I was feeling well, I did some part-time work to add to our savings. Some people might choose to go back to their parents' house to rest. However, my parents died in a car accident when I was young. All that was left were my sister, who is 3 years older than me, and myself. Because we were estranged from our relatives and there was no one to take us in, we both went to a foster house. Since then, we consulted each other about even the smallest things, never fought, and supported each other throughout our lives. My sister was always reliable, but after losing our parents, she became even more dependable. Even though she must have been incredibly anxious, she never shed a tear in front of me. My sister is already married and has children. She has her own happy life, so I didn't want to impose. On the other hand, my husband's father passed away a few years ago. He was the president of a food company and worked tirelessly until just before his death. My mother-in-law took over the company, and my husband became the vice president and executive director. Because my husband took over the visits to branch offices and partner companies for my elderly mother-in-law, I knew he traveled frequently even before we were married. Although we didn't have much time to spend together, I couldn't complain since we relied on my husband's income, especially since I got pregnant. However, I couldn't help but wonder if this long-term business trip was deliberate. Considering the company's personnel and the nature of the work, it was understandable that my husband was the most suitable candidate. But considering the timing and my mother-in-law's personality, I couldn't help but feel uneasy. This wasn't just because I was battling my ever-growing belly and changing physical condition daily. Unfortunately, I was aware that my mother-in-law disliked me. She had always been somewhat cold to me, but her harassment became even worse after my father-in-law's death, causing me stress. Being ignored was the norm, and whenever I visited her house, my shoes would be hidden, and cash would be taken from my wallet when I wasn't looking. Although it could only have been my mother-in-law, she never admitted to it as there was no proof. "What? You're saying I'm a thief? Where's the evidence for that? Is my name written on the money? Or did you take a picture of me stealing it? Ha, you're really just a money-grubbing woman after my son's income. A terrible woman who seduced my adorable only son, used pregnancy as a shield to avoid working, and extorted money from my son. You said you don't have parents? Did you get disowned because of your bad behavior? It doesn't matter why, but do you think a woman raised in a foster house without parents is qualified to be my son's wife? Ah, so that's why you're accusing someone of stealing money." She spat out every possible aggressive word and tormented me. Furthermore, I was strictly forbidden to tell anyone about this. "Try snitching to Tommy. I'm sorry to interrupt his hard work, but I'll get him fired and kick you out. How will you two survive without jobs, I wonder?" Tommy is my husband. If I told my husband about the harassment from my mother-in-law, he would be fired, taken back to his parents' house, and I would be left penniless. My mother-in-law has an extreme personality, and it's not impossible that she would actually do it. I loved my husband, and I couldn't bear to take away the father of my child in my womb just because I offended my mother-in-law, so I endured it alone. Fortunately, our house and my in-laws' house are more than an hour's drive away, so we don't see each other very often. When I reached the second trimester of my pregnancy, the so-called stable period, my sister invited me on a short trip. Both my sister and her husband had the day off during the holiday, and they could leave their child with her husband. One of the main purposes of the trip was to report my pregnancy to our parents on their death anniversary. My sister considered my physical condition a top priority, arranged for plenty of rest time, and found a hotel that was comfortable even for pregnant women. When I called my husband to tell him about the trip, he told me to spread my wings and enjoy myself. I managed to cover the travel expenses with my own money without touching the living expenses. Because my physical condition changed drastically, I packed little by little for the trip, and I was ready by the day of departure. On that day, my sister was supposed to pick me up by car in the morning, and then we would head to the train station. As I was doing the final check of my luggage and anxiously waiting for my sister, the doorbell rang. Unable to suppress my excitement and joy, I opened the door, but it was not my sister, it was my mother-in-law. And behind her were 5 unfamiliar middle-aged women.
What's with that dumbfounded face? We're staying here from today, so let us in.
Excuse me?
Everyone came from far away. Don't leave them standing outside, let them in quickly.
Still unable to understand what my mother-in-law was saying, I stood there dumbfounded.
Catherine, what are you doing standing there? Hurry up and make coffee for my friends. I thought you would be loafing around at home during the holidays, so I brought everyone to hang out with you. You should be grateful.
When my mother-in-law said that, one of the women said,
"It's a stable period, right? I was working until just before giving birth, but it's nice to be able to relax when your husband earns well."
I'm so jealous. I was internally furious, but I couldn't deny it because I was indeed living on my husband's income. Nevertheless, it was strange for her to suddenly appear and bring her friends without notice. It was extremely inconsiderate, especially since it wasn't even her house. The women were friends from a class my mother-in-law attended, and they often interacted privately. This time, to deepen their friendship, they coordinated their holidays and planned a 6-day, 5-night girls' trip a week in advance. Apparently, my mother-in-law volunteered to host.
Jess told us a lot about you. Even though you're pregnant, you're a perfect and capable wife. When we heard about the sleepover, you voluntarily offered to let us stay here, right? And with 3 meals a day.
My mother-in-law made up the story, and to prevent me from escaping, she kept it a secret until the day of. I was quite bewildered by the harassment, which was on a different scale from before, and couldn't stand it anymore, so I appealed to my mother-in-law. "Please look at this." What I pointed to was a travel bag placed at the entrance. It was not the amount of a day trip, and my mother-in-law twitched her cheeks. Before my mother-in-law could say anything, I said,
"I'm very sorry, but I wasn't aware of any such arrangement. Actually, I am planning to go back to my hometown with my sister. We will be away from home for a while, so could you please take your things with you?" My mother-in-law was a little flustered, perhaps because she didn't expect me to argue. "Oh, I've been saying that for a month now, haven't I? It's your fault, Catherine, if you don't remember. You can go back to your hometown anytime because you're unemployed, so why don't you do it next time?"
Perhaps because her friends were watching, she didn't get angry as usual. Sweat appeared on my forehead, and I forced a smile. I saw her friends whispering in the background and thought this was my chance, so I said more.
"It was decided a week ago that you would stay over, right? That means I wouldn't have known a month ago that I needed to make my house available, right? Could it be a misunderstanding on your part?"
I thought I might have said too much, but it was too late. My mother-in-law glared at me with a demonic expression, her temples throbbing. However, because there were people around, she didn't raise her hand. No matter what happens later, if I let her into the house now, it would be playing into her hands. So I kept arguing with her at the entrance. Let me in, make coffee, walk to the supermarket and buy a lot of alcohol. I was terrified of my mother-in-law and her friends, who were coming at me with an attitude that was unthinkable for guests visiting someone's home. They might force their way in from the entrance. Just as I was afraid of that, my sister arrived in perfect timing and looked surprised when she saw my mother-in-law and her friends. Maybe I looked terrible because she immediately joined the circle.
"Oh, are you Catherine's sister? What a coincidence! We are having a girls' party at Catherine's invitation today. Did you come to help by any chance? Wow, you're so considerate."
"No, I just came to pick up my sister."
"We are going out now, so I don't have time to entertain my sister's mother-in-law and friends. Could you please move out of the way because you are in the way?"
My mother-in-law was momentarily silent at my sister's clear words. However, she immediately started to speak to her friends in a mocking tone.
Oh my, she says we're in the way. Even though she knows I'm Catherine's mother-in-law, she says we're in the way. I can't believe it. Her parents must have raised her poorly, huh?
I think that's unbelievable even for me. You know you shouldn't say in the way to someone you're meeting for the first time, right? With all due respect, from my point of view, you're suspicious people who, despite my sister's repeated refusals, are forcing your way into her house, demanding coffee, and being unreasonable. Please go home. If you don't leave, I will report you to the police for trespassing. My sister did not flinch at all at the high-pitched laughter of my mother-in-law and her friends. When my sister clearly mentioned reporting to the police, my mother-in-law and her friends, their faces red with anger, came closer and started shouting.
What do you mean by that tone? If you invite someone, it's natural to entertain them, right? You're such an infuriating woman, I can't believe it.
Who do you think you are, threatening to report to the police? That's unbelievable, especially coming from someone who's a stranger. Even when confronted like that, my sister only glared at my mother-in-law and her friends with cold eyes. And then, the words of my mother-in-law and her friends began to imply insults and threats to harm me.
Oh, I can't take it anymore. I'm scared to take care of my son's child with such a stupid woman. I wonder if I could avoid seeing my grandchild's face by giving a strong shock to this fat woman's belly right now?
As vulgar laughter echoed, my sister, who had been expressionless until then, slowly narrowed her eyes. By the way, the biggest problem in such disputes is the he said she said argument. So, I have been recording everything since I came here. My sister showed her smartphone with a very refreshing smile. The screen displayed that it was recording, and the time was ticking in real time, clearly showing that it was recording. As I've been saying, please go home. It's a crime to not only not agree to this request from someone who is not even the homeowner, but also to target my sister's belly, who is the homeowner. Ignoring the stunned mother-in-law, my friends quickly made their excuses, saying,
I didn't say anything.
Yeah, I was just invited too. I had no idea Catherine was planning to go out. And scattered like the wind. By the time my mother-in-law came to her senses, her friends were quickly moving away from the house. Despite calling out for them to wait, my mother-in-law didn't even glance at me and instead ran off in their direction. My sister let out a deep sigh and carried my travel bag, which was left at the entrance, to the car. Why did you open the door? Even if you knew I was coming, you should have confirmed who the visitors were. What would have happened if those people were more impatient and careless? You have no idea. She scolded in an exasperated tone. I repeatedly apologized to her. Then, as we both fastened our seatbelts and started the car, my sister glanced at me. Were you being treated well by that lady? She doesn't seem like a kind mother-in-law at all. You're not alone anymore, you know? It's not good to be stressed during this time. Does Tommy know about this? I hope you haven't kept it from him. Ugh, you should explain everything over the phone now. She advised, fully aware of my tendency to not properly consult my husband. I clenched my smartphone and called my husband. But unfortunately, the call didn't go through. While waiting for a callback, I gradually began to tell my sister about the mother-in-law's behavior. How she didn't like me and treated me as an enemy, how she threatened to fire my husband, who is the president of the company, if I dared to consult him, and how she threatened to force a divorce and abandon me if I told my sister, who has her own family, thereby causing her trouble. Just recalling my mother-in-law's past actions made it impossible for me to hold back tears. My sister drove as smoothly as possible to minimize the bumps. However, perhaps due to the hormonal changes of pregnancy, I couldn't stop crying no matter how much I tried. Although I wanted to switch my mood to enjoy the overnight stay with my sister, my heavy heart showed no signs of lifting. Moreover, crying didn't provide any relief. Nevertheless, I had pretty much made up my mind. After this, even if I have to do it over the phone, I will inform my husband about everything to protect our unborn child. Given the stress caused by my mother-in-law's harassment, the one most affected is the baby. Yet, because of my weakness, I haven't been able to speak up, and as a result, I continue to expose myself to stress. Can I really become a mother? If I tell my husband, will my mother-in-law actually fire him, and if so, what will happen to our lives? The more I think about these worrisome thoughts, the deeper I sink into despair. Feeling a sense of relief from finally seeing my sister after so long, I let my emotions flow freely and started to cry, only to suddenly find it hard to breathe. I hurriedly tried to calm myself down, but contrary to my efforts, I felt increasingly nauseous and struggled to breathe. My throat and chest tightened, and by the time I realized I couldn't breathe, I started to panic. Then, a sharp pain shot through my abdomen, causing me to let out a raspy groan. "Catherine, are you okay? Hang on, I'm going to pull over." My sister shouted from the driver's seat as my vision began to blur. Feeling disappointed with myself for causing trouble again, Suddenly, everything before my eyes became bright and clear. I found myself staring up at a white ceiling, realizing from its height and color that it wasn't the interior of my sister's car. My gaze darted around, and I deduced that I was in a hospital, lying on a clean bed, apparently having been asleep. An 4 was hooked up to my arm, and a belt-like device was wrapped around my abdomen. Since no one was around, I pressed the nurse call button, and a nurse promptly came to my aid. From her, I learned that I had passed out due to hyperventilation. I was brought to the hospital by an ambulance my sister had called and was immediately admitted due to the risk of preterm labor. A device to monitor the baby's heartbeat was attached to my belly because I was diagnosed with a high risk of preterm labor. The risk of premature birth seems to increase with stress and intense exercise, and when I heard that, I could relate a lot. The household chores dumped on me by my mother-in-law, the barrage of verbal abuse, all of it seemed to be putting the baby in danger. I was told to be on absolute bed rest for a while, so as I was lying in bed, my sister and husband came to visit. While I was sleeping, my sister explained everything she knew to my husband. As soon as my husband saw my face, he collapsed on his knees, repeating how glad he was that I was safe. When he found out that the baby's heartbeat was confirmed to be fine, he shed tears and apologized to me.
"I'm really sorry that this happened because I wasn't around. I bear some responsibility for not noticing sooner. I will take appropriate measures, so please wait a little longer."
My husband then left the hospital room temporarily, leaving my sister and me alone. My sister took care of everything for me and even went home to bring me extra clothes and toiletries that weren't in my travel bag. "I've been your sister for many years, so I can guess where you keep your stuff and what you need." "Just kidding, Tommy actually told me where everything was in a text." My heart was warmed by my sister's smile, and I apologized again for not being able to go on the trip. While we were talking, my husband came back. His face was red with anger, but he gradually calmed down and explained the situation. "I told my mother over the phone that she needs to step down as CEO. She's been using her position to harass you, and even got her friends involved. Someone who does that doesn't deserve to be at the top of a company." Of course, she opposed it, but since she became CEO, the company's performance has been declining, and she lacks the qualities of a manager. She doesn't have the ambition to study and improve the company, and whenever she opens her mouth, she brings up the fact that she's the CEO, and if anyone opposes her, she immediately brings up my father's name and accuses them of being ungrateful. I've already discussed it with the other executives, and they agree. No matter how much she resists, I won't back down. I'll make sure everyone understands and hold a board meeting. "Oh, I'm sorry, please don't worry, dear sister-in-law. I will protect Catherine and the baby. I apologize for the trouble." Seeing my husband apologize repeatedly to my sister, I was able to feel that everything would be all right if I left it in his hands. After that, my husband visited every day. During that time, his smartphone was constantly ringing, and he turned off the notifications, saying, "It's probably my mother." I was hospitalized for about a week, and I was able to rest my body thoroughly in an environment where I was protected from my mother-in-law. My health improved rapidly, and it was decided that I would be discharged, but since there was a chance of encountering my mother-in-law if I went home, I decided to stay at my sister's house for the time being. Around the time I was discharged, my husband returned from a business trip, and to be prepared in case my mother-in-law came, he decided to wait at home. Sure enough, my mother-in-law came to our house, but my husband tried to send her away. However, just as he was about to close the front door, she shouted,
"My affair with Mr. Young from a client company has been exposed. Help me!"
Curious, my husband listened to her story, and it turned out that my mother-in-law was having an affair with the president of a client company. She was about to be forced to resign as CEO, and in her desperation, she went to her lover for help. But for some reason, she went to his house at a time when his wife was there, and she was caught red-handed. Because of who was involved, the news inevitably reached the ears of people within the company. As a result, the affair with the president of the client company pushed my mother-in-law's dismissal. The executives, who had been hesitant to act because of the respect they had for my late father-in-law, were able to unanimously agree to remove my mother-in-law from her position as CEO, thanks to the discovery of her misconduct. In the end, my mother-in-law had to resign as CEO. I seemed to be out of her mind, as I hadn't received any calls on my smartphone recently. Thinking it might be safe to go home, I decided to return to my own house. Of course, I locked the doors and monitored the visitors, and to be safe, my sister came over during the daytime when my husband wasn't home. With the approval of my sister and husband, we made sure that I was never alone. One evening, I received a text from my husband saying he was about to head home, so my sister started preparing to leave. Just then, there was a loud banging noise from the direction of the balcony. Shocked and frightened, my sister and I cautiously pulled back the curtain, and to our surprise, my mother-in-law was there. She must have seen the lights on and thought I was home. Seeing my mother-in-law banging on the glass with bloodshot eyes, I felt my knees buckle. It's one thing for her to be at the front door, but to get onto the balcony, she would have had to climb over the fence. Where on earth did she climb up from? She was yelling something, but the windows of the balcony were made of thick glass for security purposes, so I couldn't understand what she was saying. I was stunned and could only stare at my mother-in-law as she continued to pound on the glass with a demonic expression. The glass wouldn't even crack from a woman hitting it with her bare hands. However, if she found the gardening shovel on the balcony, it would be dangerous. As I panicked, wondering what to do, my sister seemed to calm down. She took out the video camera she had brought just in case and started recording my mother-in-law's actions. While she was doing that, I called the police and, realizing the gravity of the situation, I shakily contacted my husband. He had already left work and told me to hang in there for just a few more minutes. My sister continued to explain the situation to the police while holding me with one arm. The police arrived before my husband did, so my sister guided them from the front door to the balcony. When my mother-in-law saw the police officer through the window, she surprisingly climbed over the balcony railing and disappeared. Just as I thought she had escaped, the police quickly split up and ran in two directions. One went towards the balcony, and the other exited through the front door and circled around to the back. I was worried she might have gotten away, but that concern was quickly alleviated. It seemed that my mother-in-law had misstepped while climbing over the railing and was caught writhing in pain by the officer who circled around. She was taken into custody, and my sister handled all the questioning for me. I felt pathetic for relying on my sister so much, but I knew I couldn't just wallow in self-pity. I gathered my courage and explained everything to my husband when he got home. It turned out to be the right decision not to be alone, even for just a few hours. I get goosebumps just thinking about what might have happened if my sister wasn't there. In the end, my mother-in-law was arrested for breaking and entering. The recording my sister took of her threatening to hit my stomach helped our case, but since she didn't actually cause any harm, she couldn't be charged with assault. Instead, it seemed that they were going to charge her for trespassing on other residents' balconies to get to our room. My husband's company faced difficulties as the president was arrested, which negatively affected its performance and put them in a tough spot. However, my husband and the executives continued to respond sincerely, and thanks to the trust built by my father-in-law, they managed to keep the business running. My husband decided to become the president and make the company even better than it was during my father-in-law's era. On the other hand, I was relieved that my mother-in-law was no longer in my life, and I was able to safely give birth. Despite being told I was at risk for premature birth, the delivery went smoothly, and I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. During my hospital stay, not only my husband but also my sister and her family visited me almost every day. After I was discharged, they even came to my house to help with the housework. My sister's child, who just started middle school and wants to be a childcare worker in the future, said, "Cute," many times while looking at the baby, so I let her hold him until she was satisfied. Seeing our children interact fulfilled a dream I had since I was a child, and I felt incredibly happy. I'm sure my sister felt the same way. Watching our children together, her eyes seemed kinder than ever before. After my maternity leave ended, I was able to return to work, which I love. However, I couldn't work all day like before, and until my child grows up a bit, working about 3 hours a day was the limit. The stress after childbirth was nothing compared to the harassment I received from my mother-in-law during pregnancy. I didn't feel much irritation towards my long-awaited child and was able to interact with him in a relaxed manner. About 2 years later, we found out that a second child was growing in my belly. While we eagerly awaited the pregnancy with our son, it was not the same this time. Of course, we wanted to have another child, but we were able to take our time with family planning while discussing it as a couple, so perhaps that's why the stork brought a baby to us. Our son, although still small, was delighted at the prospect of having a younger brother or sister and would stroke my belly every day. As a family, we are all looking forward to meeting our new family member and spending each day happily in anticipation. I won't approve any paid leave for you. I couldn't believe my ears. You always challenge me. You don't need to come back. Having been told this, even I had reached my breaking point. Are you really sure? She must have been taken aback by my response. Her eyes widened in surprise. Too bad. My name is Nancy, and I turned 28 this year. I've been working at the Can-Do Corporation for 10 years, making me an experienced employee at a young age. While my family wasn't wealthy, my parents took great care of me. Being an only child, I rarely got new things. Most of my clothes were hand-me-downs from cousins or neighbors. It was rare to get new outfits. Still, I was quite content. Neighbors and relatives showered me with love, and I have fond memories of going on picnics in local parks with my parents during weekends. Perhaps it was out of sympathy, but I'm still close with my cousins and we keep in touch regularly. Growing up surrounded by love, when I was in 12th grade, I served as the student council president and had excellent grades. My class teacher suggested I pursue further studies. Despite being offered a scholarship to college based on my grades, I declined. I'm not interested in going to college. I want to work as a public servant. My parents tried to persuade me otherwise, but considering the costs of living alone, I went against their wishes and became a public servant. I just wanted to relieve my parents of any burden as soon as possible. But then, my father was diagnosed with a severe illness and passed away before I could repay his kindness. I decided to take care of my mother in place of my father, continuing to live with her. In the hustle and bustle of daily life, time flew as I experienced various facets of working life. By the time 5 years had passed, I'd become a respected figure in the office, leading a comfortable life. I've been given the responsibility of training newcomers and occasionally acting on behalf of my boss. Moreover, the bonuses were good, allowing me to give about $600 monthly to my parents. In my personal life, I enjoyed trips with friends, colleagues, and my boyfriend. One day, our manager was transferred and replaced by a new one. This new female manager was said to be the president's daughter. Rumor had it she had been loafing around, relying on her father's wealth. Unable to stand by and watch, the president decided to put her in a responsible position to teach her some life lessons. Only the president and I knew this. Just because she was the president's daughter, many in the company, who knew she was hired due to her background and had little real-world experience, didn't think highly of her. The work environment started getting tense, and the atmosphere was increasingly stifling. and to think the trouble would eventually come my way. It happened when I made her a cup of hot coffee upon her request.
What's this? Are you trying to annoy me?
I made it just as you told me. She glared at me and threw the hot coffee in my direction.
Ouch! What are you doing?
Unable to avoid it, I held my right arm that got splashed with coffee and glared back at her.
How is this according to my instructions? I said I wanted it warm with extra milk and sugar.
I made it warm with 2 glasses of milk and 2 scoops of sugar.
It's too hot. And it's common sense to take 4 glasses of milk and 3 scoops of sugar.
She again acts as if her own common sense is the world's common sense and imposes her values on others. I'm sorry. I'll make you another one right away.
This is why I don't like high school grads. I heard from my father that you're competent and trusted by everyone.
I have much to learn. It's only because of the support of everyone here that I seem competent. As she continued with her snide remarks, the pain in my burned arm intensified. My mind was occupied with trying very hard to resist the urge to get away from this place and cool my burnt arm as soon as possible. I was looking forward to meeting you after my father spoke so highly of you. But what a disappointment. I wonder how you won him over. Upon hearing her harsh words, a nearby employee tried to step in and help, but I signaled that I was okay, trying not to get noticed by her. Next, that employee would become the target of her. Those who had been targeted by her so far were mentally driven into a corner and forced to resign voluntarily. And this time, it seems that I've become the target of her. As I was pondering how to resolve the situation, she forcibly grabbed my burned arm and squeezed the burned area tightly.
You've got guts to ignore me. Don't think you'll get away with this.
I grimaced in pain. Satisfied with my reaction, she released my arm and ordered me to make coffee again. I excused myself and hurried to the pantry to cool the affected area. It sucks. After work, I immediately visited a dermatologist and got prescribed an ointment, but it never completely healed and left a mark, so I dressed in a way that others couldn't see, to avoid causing concern. From that day on, the harassment from her escalated.
What's this document? Nothing but mistakes. Don't take your job lightly.
What exactly is wrong with the document? While trying to gauge her mood, I asked, and she threw it at me.
There's no way there could be mistakes in this practice document I did. And yet, to be pointed out like this with a red pen, it's unpleasant.
I sighed at the immature behavior of such a grown adult. To be frank, this document clearly needs to be redone due to its inadequacies. You came into this department without understanding anything. I would appreciate it if you could accept the mistakes honestly and acquire knowledge appropriate for a manager. As a trainer, I've been assigning tasks to her, utilizing the experience I had with new employees so far, but nothing seemed to get through to her, a lump of pride.
Don't talk back. You guys should just do everything. I'm the manager, so I don't have to do this kind of stuff.
That's not how it works. Besides, this is what the president personally told us. You're desperate to be liked by my father, huh? Weren't you from a fatherless family? I was a little surprised when she suddenly brought up the topic of my family. Furthermore, I had never talked about this with her before. To be precise, you have only your mother now, right? Despite working so hard in a poor family, your father wasn't rewarded and fell ill. We're at work now. Let's stop discussing irrelevant topics. I just thought of having a little interaction. What a boring woman. Even I couldn't hide my irritation when she made fun of my parents. You're getting angry, huh? That's hilarious. My parents are very wonderful and respectable people. You, who know nothing, have no right to say anything. She quickly responded to the slight drop in my voice tone.
So that's your true nature, huh? Is it okay to have that attitude with the president's daughter? Maybe I should report to my father about your true nature and how I've been treated badly by you. Feel free to do so. Please correct the test document properly and submit it by today. I'm definitely gonna drive you out.
As I turned my back on her, she whispered in a voice only I could hear, but I ignored her and returned to my seat. Afterward, her sarcasm continued, but I managed to get her to learn the basics. It's still a long road ahead. Even though they were basics, it included minor things like detailed computer operations and types of documents. I sat on a bench installed on the office rooftop drinking canned coffee during the break to soothe my exhausted body. While thinking about my future, I suddenly received a call from an unknown number on my smartphone. Hello? Is this Nancy? This is Saveview Hospital. Your mother was urgently transported here, but she's in a critical condition. Can you come right away? My mind went blank, and I couldn't remember much afterward. I left an early leave notice on her desk first and caught a taxi to the hospital. Upon arriving at the hospital and explaining the situation at the reception, a nurse guided me to where my mother was.
Mom, this can't be true.
There lay my mother, with a beautiful and gentle expression, asleep. According to the doctor, my mother had collapsed at her workplace. By the time she arrived at the hospital, they were in a state of believing in miracles. Indeed, my mother's heart wasn't strong since the past. Yet, the symptoms were stable, and there were no issues during regular checkups, but the mental strain since my father passed away might have affected her, perhaps. For a time, I sobbed, hugging my mother tightly. After coming home with my mother, as the funeral date has been set, I called female manager to ask for my first ever paid leave. I'm sorry for leaving early today and causing trouble. My mother just passed on, so could I take about a week off for the funeral and all the other stuff that comes with it?
Oh, so that's why you left early when I wasn't around? It was an emergency with my mother.
Her cold and harsh tone hit hard, considering how down I was. I won't approve any paid leave for you. I couldn't believe my ears.
In the 10 years I've been here, I've never taken a day of paid leave.
So what? I've contributed so much to this company, so shouldn't I be able to take paid leave to say goodbye to my mother? You always challenge me. You don't need to come back. Having been told this, even I had reached my breaking point.
Are you really sure? I'll take you up on that offer.
She started ranting, but I unilaterally cut the call without a second thought. The funeral went smoothly. I couldn't just sit grieve, and I kept myself busy, handling various tasks and sending out thank you notes to those who'd been so kind. Took my mind off things for a bit. She tried reaching out multiple times, but I ignored every attempt. A bit later, I got a call from the president, so I made my way to the office after 2 weeks. I walked straight to the president's office. On my way, I bumped into 2 coworkers who consoled me. I'm sorry, but I'm going to the president's office first. Their kindness made me feel a bit better. It's Nancy. May I come in? After knocking and asking permission, I was let in promptly.
Hey there, been a while. Heard you've been out of touch for 2 weeks. Doesn't sound like you.
My apologies. You see, I laid out everything, not sugarcoating how she had been treating other employees and myself. Hearing negative stuff about his own daughter must have hurt him, but the president listened to every word. I apologize for my daughter's actions. To be honest, my wife and I spoiled her, and this is the outcome. No worries. I think my parents must have felt the same way as parents. Seeing my awkwardness, the president smiled gently.
Nancy, you're truly a wonderful lady. My daughter's situation was my judgment error. I've spoken to those who've resigned in the past 2 weeks. I can't apologize enough for that.
To the best of my knowledge, this was the first time I'd ever seen the president looking so troubled. Ever since you stopped coming to the department my daughter works in, things have gone haywire. Just the other day, the entire team staged a group protest. Really? I had no idea things had escalated that much. So, what are you going to do about it? The president wore a sad expression for a moment but quickly returned to the person I knew. So I need your help. It's easy for me to have my daughter resign, but that alone won't satisfy all employees. Can you help us? Looking into the president's earnest eyes, I made up my mind. Understood. I'm more than happy to assist. And so, the sanctions against her began. Hey, how long do you plan on taking time off? The exasperated female manager finally reached out. Wasn't it you who told me not to come in? It's strange, I'm just following your orders.
Don't give me that. We're in chaos here. Get to the office now.
Reluctantly, I changed into my work clothes and headed to the office. However, there wasn't a single employee present. It was eerily quiet, just like working on a weekend. It's a weekday today, right? Feels weird. It was when I muttered to myself in an empty office. I heard yelling from a woman and the sound of something being thrown from my department. Peeking cautiously inside, I saw her causing a ruckus. What's going on? I called out from behind her. She swiftly turned and grabbed at me.
It's all your fault. Ever since you stopped coming, everyone else followed suit. Now I can't get in touch with anyone. How will you make up for this?
I'm not quite following. Can you please not shift the blame? I calmly told her. She let me go and pushed me away. Such an infuriating woman. Even my father won't help. What's going on? How long has it been since everyone stopped coming?
Half a day. Because of that, I've been handling calls which I've never done, and I have no clue what to do anymore.
The slumped figure of her was pitiful. Her hair was a mess, and the nail polish that she wouldn't remove despite numerous reminders was now chipped. She must have hung her jacket somewhere. There were noticeable frays here and there on her jacket. Seeing her, who had always acted like a queen, now in such a state, I couldn't help but laugh. Serves you right. What did you say? This is on you. What did you think of everyone?
No one's going to follow someone who just waves their power around without any real skills.
As I firmly told her, she approached with her face turning red.
Say that one more time. You really want to be banned from the company?
Well, I'd like to stay if you resign.
Well then, you're fired.
I'll be taking over this company. What a pity for you. Too bad. She was wearing an eerie smile, and for some reason, she had a triumphant look on her face. I answered, all right. It was a short time, but thank you very much. It must have been an unexpected reaction. She had her eyes wide open in surprise. You do realize you're fired, right?
Of course. Now I should pack up my things.
I carefully made my way to my desk, avoiding the papers scattered on the floor. Once there, I started pulling out stuff from the drawers. Wait. Are you really quitting? Yes, why? I asked, tilting my head. Well, shouldn't you at least finish up today's work? Her earlier confidence had disappeared, and she seemed desperate. Do you know that it's illegal to reject a properly justified paid leave request without a valid reason? Huh? It's a violation of labor laws, you know. It's mandated by law. Her face turned ashen. She was clearly in turmoil, but I continued. We're all human. I understand there are compatibility issues. But that doesn't mean you should drive people into a corner. You're unfit to be a manager. Makes me wonder what your folks are like.
Who the hell do you think you are? Insulting my parents like that? You're not getting off easy.
Well, you insulted my parents too, so you're not getting off easy either. She, shaking with rage, tried to put on a brave face.
Our worlds are entirely different. Don't lump me with you.
You're really despicable. I heard you said the same thing and drove those who left into a corner.
That's right. They treated me like I was worthless, so I drove them into a corner as far as I could. Felt so refreshing when they were gone.
I sighed deeply, shifting my gaze to the corridor. Curious, she followed my gaze, muttering, "Father? Why are you here?" There stood the president. As the president stepped into the department, he walked directly to her. "Father, there's been a misunderstanding."
No need for explanations. I've got evidence of your deeds.
No, they just envied me for my skills and set me up. I did nothing wrong. The president lashed out at her, who tried to justify her actions.
You idiot! Because you're so incompetent, I was hoping the competent employees would reform you. Yet under your lead, in the past few months, our performance plummeted and even caused losses to the company.
But you made me a manager, so that means you had faith in me, hadn't you? I promise I'll meet your expectations this time.
No. If I didn't give you a position, you'd have run away.
The president's imposing demeanor made her buckle.
I never even thought of letting you take over the company. This time for sure, I'll transfer you to the countryside to reform you from the ground up. Please, have mercy.
Look who's talking. We'll get constant updates from your new location. And the folks there are pretty reliable, so brace yourself. Turning pale, she lay on her back, crying and laughing hysterically. I chirped, too bad. With a bright and cheerful voice, I said that to her. Later that day, without anyone to see her off, the former female manager left the company. The next day, the employees, enjoying the day off declared by the president, returned to work jubilant. With the departure of the former female manager, peaceful days were restored, and smiles returned to the employees' faces. Meanwhile, the former female manager started from scratch in a rural town where there were no conveniences or entertainment. There, her family's influence didn't matter, and she was strictly schooled by her colleagues every day. As the days passed, she began to change, and finally, she started to speak respectfully and became receptive to feedback from others, as reported by the president. The most surprising thing was receiving an apology call from her. At first, I listened to her, but at the end of the call, she begged, "I've reflected enough. I want you to ask the president to let me return." Of course, my answer was no. I ignored further calls and blocked her number. The president personally contacted those who had resigned due to her and invited them back. As a result, the company's performance quickly recovered, even surpassing its previous state. As for me, I was sitting in the seat of the manager, which became vacant after she left. When the president personally appointed me, everyone in the department was even happier than I was. While the managerial job is tougher than I imagined and I am a bit overwhelmed by my sudden career move, with the support of the employees, I am doing well. Having been both physically and mentally hurt, especially with burns, I have been compensated with settlement money deducted from the former female manager's salary, which has been added to my own pay. Thanks to that, my life has become very comfortable.
Recently, my boyfriend of 2 years proposed to me, and I am over the moon.
We are expecting a child next year, and both of us are excited. Even though I have just entered my second trimester, we are already fully prepared for the birth.
Huh? Still single at your age? Pathetic for an old maid like you.
I met my ex-husband at a fancy Chinese restaurant. Despite his persistent sarcastic remarks, we exchanged words, and then my sister, who eloped with someone else, appeared. When my ex-husband announced he'd be marrying her soon, I laughed at him mockingly.
Oh? Didn't I tell you?
Feeling on top of the world, my ex-husband was caught off guard when I made a shocking confession. My name is Michelle Smith. I'm a 39-year-old housewife. I've been married to my husband, Mike, who works in the transportation business, for about 2 years. We met at work where I was previously an office clerk. I took a liking to Mike's lively and cheerful demeanor and made the first move on him. I found his easygoing and manly charisma very appealing. It was love at first sight. Upon hearing my feelings, he reciprocated, and we got married in a short span of 6 months. I thought he was a kind and pleasant person while we were dating. However, after our marriage, he turned into someone else entirely. It became routine for him to shower me with abusive words, and there were times when his actions made me feel like I wasn't even treated as a human being. I never imagined married life would be so tough and painful. Every day became gloomy, and I gradually started to fear Mike. He is a truck driver, but his job is specifically as a light truck delivery driver. I wish he'd been a long-haul driver so he would have been away from home more often, giving me some breathing space. As a light truck driver, his job entails delivering many loads to various places in a single day. So, he usually comes home in the evening. Early in our marriage, I had expressed my desire to work. I think I want to contribute to our finances. If both of us work, we can save more, and it'll be useful if we have kids. The moment I said that, Mike slammed his beer glass onto the table and started berating me.
You saying my earnings aren't enough, huh?
I never intended to imply that. Probably because he was drunk and overreacting, I found him terrifying. He seemed ready to hurl the glass at me at any moment, so I hurriedly tried to placate him.
No. I just don't want to be a burden to you, that's all. You're probably looking down on me inside. Who do you think allows us to live this comfortably? Even if you work, you wouldn't earn much. Don't act all high and mighty.
I realized after marrying him that Mike has extreme paranoia and wild mood swings. I never saw this side of him when we dated, so it was unexpected. Could I really spend the rest of my life with someone like this? The thought intensified my anxiety. But another incident fanned the flames of my worries. I'm truly happy Michelle married into our family. Mike rarely brought girlfriends home, so I was worried he'd never marry. This happened during a Thanksgiving's gathering at my in-laws' house. They are genuinely kind people who dote on me a lot. When we got married, they were over the moon, as if they had gained a daughter. I got along well with my mother-in-law. And my father-in-law was also very kind to me. One of the few consolations in my suffocating married life was dining out with my in-laws. However, in front of them, Mike began making a mockery of me. That turning point was during a family reunion.
Must be nice, huh? Having a beauty like Michelle. Look at my wife. See that flabby belly of hers?
A male relative began making fun of his wife, drawing laughter from the crowd. Beside him, his wife playfully pinched his belly and chimed in, giving a sort of husband-wife comedy routine, lifting the mood. Then, my husband turned the tables and decided to poke fun at me.
What are you talking about, uncle? Michelle looks so childlike, hardly womanly. Your wife looks way more elegant and mature.
I was left speechless by this unexpected comment and revelation. The male relative said,
Come on, cut it out.
But everyone seemed to find it hilarious. The only ones who looked concerned were my in-laws. Michelle, go to the kitchen. Help my wife with dinner preparations there. My father-in-law, seeing my distress, gave me these instructions as a way to escape the scene. Grateful, I rushed to the kitchen accompanied by my mother-in-law. Tears streamed down my face due to the overwhelming incident, but my mother-in-law comforted me as if she were my own mother. As for my father-in-law, he stepped in and chastised everyone, insisting they apologize to me. All did, except for my heavily intoxicated husband who remained defiant.
Why should a husband apologize to his wife? That's why Dad always gets ridiculed by Mom. Can't you have some dignity?
And for some reason, this led to a father-son argument. The gathering ended early that day, and from then on, the relationship between my husband and his father deteriorated. My visits to my husband's family home became infrequent. Life after that was a living nightmare. I lost my only source of joy and began to feel weak and lost day by day. Even daily chores felt monumental, and whenever my husband remembered that day, he'd shout at me.
You must have said something unnecessary to them. Thanks to you, I was humiliated in front of everyone. What are you gonna do about it?
Fearing his temper, I became constantly on edge. Living on the 10th floor of an apartment building, I often thought if jumping would offer an escape from my misery. When we're mentally drained, making rational decisions becomes a challenge, and I felt exactly that way. It was then, during one of these despairing moments, my sister visited. You haven't been in touch recently. I got worried. Michelle, you look awful. My elder sister, Catherine, who's 3 years older, worked nights. In her previous job, she was the most sought after, probably because she looked much younger than her age. It was rare for her to drop by unannounced. Turns out, she was in the neighborhood checking on the renovations of her new club and decided to stop by. Something happened with your husband? My sister and I were the best of buddies growing up. When I got married, nobody was happier than my sister, Catherine. She cried tears of joy and celebrated with me like no other. I just want to disappear.
Whoa, what happened?
Seeing the distraught look on Catherine's face, tears welled up in my eyes as I conveyed the painful situation I was in. Every day, it felt like I was being emotionally abused by my husband. It felt like living in a prison, a life full of pain and despair. There were moments I thought of ending it all, overwhelmed by it all. Catherine, after hearing all of this, showed visible anger, saying she's gonna go yell at my husband right then and there. But just imagining what could happen to me if she did made me even more scared. Tears streaming down my face, I pleaded with her not to confront him. Seeing my reaction, Catherine regained her composure and started brainstorming what could be done. After a silence between us, something seemed to click in Catherine's mind. With a bright expression, she whispered a plan into my ear. Hearing her plan, I exclaimed in surprise and asked if she was out of her mind.
You think that'll actually work? Who do you think I am?
Catherine said, confidence oozing from her every pore. I trust Catherine to pull it off, but the risks if her plan was discovered made me anxious. Don't you want to get out of this and be free? Seeing me unable to make a decision, Catherine turned serious and told me it was ultimately up to my courage. Hearing that, I made up my mind and agreed to her plan. From that day on, Catherine came over nearly every day. People who are emotionally abusive tend to act all high and mighty in public. If I'm around, he won't be able to pull anything on you, Michelle, right? Saying this, she visited me frequently over the next few months until her new shop was ready. At first, my husband seemed unsure of Catherine's frequent visits, but he seemed to enjoy the drinks they shared every evening, gradually warming up to her. Catherine made sure Mike drank enough to get really drunk and stayed with him until he fell asleep.
You're always joining me for drinks, so feel free to stay the night anytime.
Mike, now quite fond of Catherine, began to show her affection he never showed me, even trying to stop her from leaving. But Catherine always declined his offer with a polite smile, assuring him she'd be back the next day. For Mike, time spent with Catherine seemed like a dream. He was so enchanted by her that he seemed to have forgotten all about me. But then, when Catherine's shop was about to have its grand reopening, an incident occurred. I'm divorcing you. Out of the blue, Mike declared he wanted a divorce. Naturally, I was shocked by his words and demanded an explanation. Why all of a sudden? I've found someone I care about more than you. I want to be happy with her. I want you to leave. I flat out refused to accept his selfish reasoning. I didn't accept my husband's decision to divorce. However, Mike seemed to have expected this and coldly mentioned hiring a lawyer. A meeting with a lawyer present took place a few days later. Even there, Mike hurled unbelievable accusations at me. You just want money, right? Do you want the property? I'll give whatever you ask, so let's end this. In front of anyone, Mike made it clear he no longer had feelings for me. He seemed to want to end our marriage so badly that he didn't mind paying a hefty sum to make it happen. The lawyer, probably feeling uncomfortable, showed me the average amounts for such cases. You really don't have much affection for me, do you? I could tell where your heart was. Easily figuring out who you're thinking of and who you wish to spend your life with. I lowered my head, realizing resisting was futile, and accepted the divorce terms. Fine. But I demand the division of the property. He probably thinks he can just earn it back. Mike, oblivious and elated at the thought of a smooth divorce. Yet, watching him, I let out a mysterious smirk. And without him catching on, the divorce proceedings went underway. However, while I may have accepted, it was Mike's parents who firmly opposed it. Later, when we went to inform his parents, They shouted at Mike and spoke in my defense.
What on earth are you thinking? Exactly, Michelle has been so dedicated to this family, and you talk about divorce? And having someone else? You can't be serious.
His mother, teary-eyed, tried to convince Mike while his father, with a flushed face, was visibly angered and scolded him. But their words seemed to be just noise to him. Annoyed, he dismissively responded.
It doesn't matter if you accept it or not.
She's already agreed to it.
It's because you pushed her into a corner with lawyers.
They must have really not wanted us to divorce. They've always cherished me like their own child, and the thought of separation was painful to them. I could feel their desperate pleas, and I felt guilty for betraying them. I love them too. I would have loved to live as their daughter. If only things didn't turn out this way with Mike. Regret was the only thing that filled my heart, and I couldn't hold back the tears.
People like you are so damn annoying. I'm done with her. I'm gonna marry someone I truly care for and be happy. Stop nagging me.
Mike, now completely enraged by his parents' words, started shouting back in defiance. Naturally, they couldn't accept his decision, and Mike was disowned right there and then. And so, Mike left his parents' home, apparently eloping with his love interest, and our divorce was finalized. Half a year passed. I was dining at an upscale Chinese restaurant, invited by someone, and enjoying a meal with my parents. Isn't that Michelle? The one who called out to me was none other than Mike. I had gone outside to make a call and bumped into him in the hallway. Long time no see. Didn't think you were still around. His condescending tone hadn't changed. My face must have shown my disgust.
What's with that face? If you've got something to say, spit it out.
He wasn't shouting because we were in public, but he still looked down at me with cold eyes. I held back my anger and turned my face away.
Acting all high and mighty when you can't even stand up for yourself. Did you manage to find a boyfriend after our split?
Mocking my demeanor, Mike sneered at me. I knew this side of him only after our marriage, and I regret not realizing it sooner. It doesn't concern you anymore. Without even confirming if I was in a relationship. Mike, with his usual sly grin, kept on taunting me.
Really? Still single? Pretty pathetic for an old hag.
Mike peered into my face with an expression that screamed he felt he'd won at life, even more so than before our split. I was about to give him a piece of my mind when...
Oh. Michelle, Mike. Didn't expect to see you two here.
My sister Catherine walked into the store, calling out to both of us.
Catherine.
Perfect timing.
I was just about to share some news with Michelle here.
The smug look on Mike's face was almost disgusting as he snaked an arm around Catherine, drawing her close. I just stood there, not letting his actions fluster me, my gaze icy cold as I watched the scene unfold.
I thought I'd tell her first that we're gonna get married.
He bragged, pulling Catherine even closer. I had always suspected that his feelings for Catherine were the real reason he wanted a divorce. But looking at them now, with emotionless eyes, Mike, still not realizing the gravity of the situation, shot me a smug grin.
Sorry, I guess. I mean, I'm gonna be living the dream with her. But hey, you're not too bad looking. Maybe with a bit of effort?
I'm sorry, Mike. I can't marry you. Gently shaking off his arm, Catherine dropped the bombshell with a smile. His face was a picture of shock, unable to comprehend her statement. The truth is, I never had any feelings for you.
Wait, what? What are you saying? Didn't she tell you?
I couldn't resist, my voice dripping with mock confusion as I savored every moment of his confusion.
What do you mean didn't tell me? The whole thing, Mike, was a plot Catherine and I hatched to make sure we divorced.
And as I walked over to join my sister, we exchanged amused smiles.
Right?
Even witnessing this, Mike couldn't fathom what was going on. His words came out jumbled. Was this all just a play?
Thanks to Catherine here, I got quite the alimony from you. Really grateful for that.
Rejecting his initial proposal for divorce was all part of a plan to get as much property as possible from him.
It was all Catherine's idea. I was eager to divorce but didn't want to raise suspicion. That's why I played along. No way! Catherine would never say that.
Why not? Struggling to come to terms with the truth, Mike babbled on, refusing to believe my words. I tilted my head in confusion and asked, "Why do you say that?"
Why would Catherine say something like that? She said she's gonna marry me.
Well, if you took my sales pitch so seriously. I was just doing my job, entertaining a client. Catherine responded to Mike's comment, her brows furrowed in feigned concern. She touched her cheek with an exaggeratedly innocent gesture, sighing softly as she spoke. I only entertained you as a client. I never had any feelings for you. I'm sorry if I gave you the wrong impression.
So you've been fooling me this whole time? For the past 6 months?
You were such a valuable customer, Mike. Always trying to one-up everyone. It was kind of cute, actually. Mockingly, my sister spoke with a derisive laugh. The ex-husband, completely fooled by her theatrical performance, displayed his anger and raised his voice despite being inside a shop.
All those words about wanting to be with me, asking me to divorce Michelle, were all lies?
Who in their right mind would want to be with someone like you, an emotionally abusive husband?
What did you just say?
The sharp words of my sister infuriated my ex-husband, who began breathing heavily in agitation. While cautiously watching out for any signs the ex-husband might become physically aggressive, I observed their exchange and discreetly reached for my phone. It was hard keeping up the charade for half a year, but thankfully you're simple-minded. It wasn't like I could just stay married to you. In truth, my sister was already married when I was with my ex-husband. She has a husband who works as a bodyguard. To ensnare my ex-husband, my sister persuaded him by saying she was also going to get a divorce. From the perspective of my ex, who had never been popular in his life, the fact that someone was chasing after him so much was a delightful feeling. At the same time, he reveled in the superiority of being able to take someone away from another. Essentially, he fell right into my sister's trap.
So, about you taking time to get that divorce.
That was obviously a lie. As you can see, my marriage is perfectly fine. At that moment, a man emerged from behind, walking towards us with a smile. Pleasure to meet you. Seems like my wife has been causing you some trouble.
You can't be serious.
This is my husband. I invited him today to introduce him to you. My sister, with her radiant smile, made a point to show off by linking arms with my brother-in-law, exuding happiness. My ex-husband looked dumbfounded. His face a mix of anger and sadness.
It's a shame, isn't it? Wasting half a year only to end up being thrown out of your own home. It's so pitiful, I can't even bear to look.
As my ex-husband seemed dazed from the shock, he tried to lash out at me, reaching to grab my collar. But my brother-in-law swiftly intervened, handling him like he was a mere child.
What do you know about what I've gone through this past year, chasing after her? Do you understand? I don't, and I don't want to. You play with people's lives and then act all high and mighty. Do you understand how much pain you've caused me?
Facing my ex-husband's aggressive stance, my voice broke with anger and tears as I finally let out all the frustrations I'd bottled up.
The way you ridiculed me in front of our family. Your attitude towards your in-laws. All your actions during our marriage. I will never forgive you. You're going to get a taste of hell.
I then turned around and called out, "Please, come out." Emerging from the room behind me were not just my ex-husband's parents, but also my own parents and even my husband's relatives. Now everyone can see your true colors and just how pathetic you truly are. Ignoring my ex's questioning gaze, I played a voice recording I had received from my sister. It had him speaking to her in a disgustingly sweet manner. "Are you really going to break up with Michelle?"
Of course, I don't need someone useless who can only do house chores. I prefer someone mature and attractive like you, Catherine.
His sleazy voice was so palpable that it made my skin crawl. Even though it was nauseating to hear, I did not stop the playback. In front of the entire family, my ex-husband was being made an example of. Don't you love Michelle?
Of course not. She's nothing more than a maid to me. I only married her because she would be a notch in my belt, no emotional connection there.
Everyone was visibly repulsed by his comments. He started to create a scene, demanding the recording be turned off, but my burly brother-in-law wasn't having it. He restrained him effortlessly, ensuring he couldn't interfere.
She's so obedient. Just a little threat, and she'll do anything. She's more like a servant, someone I can throw away anytime. I have no attachments to her.
Having heard the evidence of the emotional abuse he directed at me, his in-laws were furious. Everyone present unanimously criticized him.
You're a disgrace to this family. How could you say such things about your dear wife?
You're pathetic, even for a man. I'm embarrassed to even call you family. As everyone looked at him with contempt, I spoke coldly. Nobody's on your side anymore. Stay away from her family. I never want to see your face again. Having masterfully executed this public reprimand, I stopped the voice recorder and asked my brother-in-law to throw him out. My ex tried to retaliate, but to no avail. He was forcibly ejected from the premises. After that, the store was locked up, but my husband made a scene out front demanding it be opened. Eventually, he was reported and taken to the police station. My sister and I, having exposed my husband's wrongdoings, gave each other a high five and shared our joy of having achieved our revenge. It felt like a celebration as we ordered food at the restaurant, and everyone showed sympathy for the hardships I had endured.
Reserving the whole place was the right call. Everyone could relax and enjoy without feeling restrained,
said my sister, Catherine, who had arranged it. I expressed my gratitude to Catherine, who had helped me through everything, and I savored a meal with her for the first time in a while. And so, I got my revenge on my ex-husband. After that, it seemed like he was almost stalking Catherine, got reported to the police again, and apparently, my brother-in-law, Mike, gave him a taste of his own medicine. After that, Mike was too scared to show his face around my brother-in-law. 13 years have passed since, and now I'm handling the accounting at Catherine's store. I'm still in touch with my ex-in-laws and occasionally dine with them. I'm deeply grateful to Catherine for helping me out of my shell. I'll repay this favor someday. With that thought, today, I'm gonna work hard alongside Catherine.